Good evening, everybody. James Hancock here. I am in an absolutely fantastic mood because I just caught the first two episodes of the new show Mindhunter coming soon from Netflix. The New York Film Festival was kind enough to show us the first two episodes, both of which were directed by David Fincher. While I wouldn't necessarily count myself amongst the diehard, rabid David Fincher fans, I see all of his movies, many of them multiple times, so I would definitely say I am a fan. I'm just not a psycho. However, anytime David Fincher takes a crack at anything crime-related, we should sit up and notice because he's rapidly solidifying his reputation as arguably the best director in that genre of the last 25, 30 years. I mean, between Seven and Zodiac, maybe I'd include Gone Girl, and now Mindhunter, he just has a knack for it. He also just has this incredible, brilliant command and control over the image. It just seems like almost like cutting diamonds. Whether you're talking about his shot composition or his camera movements, he just shoots a movie as beautifully as anybody alive. Not in an exhibitionist way. It's all in the service of the story. It's very lean and it's very elegant, and he can just shoot the shit out of anything. What's interesting is that this was the New York Film Festival, and while it's still a film festival, I noticed that a lot of movies, and in this case a show, had either Netflix or Amazon listed among the producers, and it just seems like we're watching a giant changing of the guard right now when you see a director of David Fincher's caliber working with Netflix and not one of the traditional players like Warner Brothers or Universal or any big studio you care to mention. I should say in advance also, I'm not going to be getting into any major spoilers because I'm going to wait until I've seen the entire first season on Friday before doing my comprehensive deep dive. But I just figured since I've seen the first two episodes, might as well give my first impressions. But Mindhunter's just your classic case of really smart, unpretentious, world-class entertainment. And we get precious little of that these days. Ordinarily, I'm not necessarily drawn to the crime genre. I feel like if you like police procedurals or FBI shows, there are a million to choose from. There always have been, and there always will be. But a lot of them are generic or formulaic or predictable. And Mindhunter is the polar opposite. Mindhunter is about a major point in the history of the FBI in 1977, where a lot of their techniques and ideas got fundamentally rewritten. Because basically the FBI really came into its own in the 1930s, chasing a lot of glorified bank robbers. A lot of guys like Machine Gun Kelly or Babyface Nelson or John Dillinger. And these are people who are essentially out for profit and gain. But what we see at the beginning of the first episode of Mindhunter is that a lot of local police are completely and totally bewildered by these unfathomable acts of violence and perversity that are completely shaking them to the core of their souls. And our two central characters, played by Jonathan Groff and Holt McCallany, they basically travel around sharing the FBI's insights and techniques with these local police departments, and when possible, lending a hand into some of their cases. But what they're realizing is that they don't have any answers, they don't have any magic pixie dust to sprinkle on their problems. And Jonathan Groff's character, a guy named Holden Ford, he's very young, he's very smart, he's very idealistic, and he's insanely curious. And he's just asking questions all the time. And he knows that the FBI can do better, but he's encountering a lot of resistance because he basically wants to get inside the head of the killers and the crazy people out there who, a lot of agents, their first instinct is just to put them in the ground. Whereas Holden, what he really wants to do is understand how they become who they become so he could possibly solve some unsolved crimes and or prevent them from happening in the first place. I was watching an interview with David Fincher, and he said that he learned his lesson from Zodiac. Zodiac is a movie I really admire, but what he said he realized was that you're asking a lot of an audience if you give them a really big, long movie with no clear resolution at the end, and that he wanted to basically correct some of those mistakes with this show. And I have to say, for these first 2 hours, these first two episodes, I was completely, totally riveted every second. And what's crazy is that the first episode, a lot of it is just about Holden Ford going to class. I mean, he's either teaching classes or attending classes, trying to up his game and increase his skill set and pooling knowledge and resources with other agents. But they really get into criminal psychology. And as someone who's not into criminal psychology at all, I can't even begin to imagine how interesting the show might be to someone who has a legitimate interest in this particular topic. Another interesting thing that I heard David Fincher say is that he wanted to dial back this modern trend of depicting serial killers as gourmet chefs and opera aficionados, that he wanted to get back to down and dirty, realistic, unexplainable figures, not romanticize these characters and try to turn them into glamorous anti-heroes. And the show really is about the two FBI agents. It's basically, this is a show about ideas and conversations. Just people in rooms, arguing, talking, having confrontations. Holt McCallany, who's always good, he plays the classic grizzled veteran. He's very grounded. He is open-minded, but he's also got zero tolerance for bullshit, and anytime a conversation gets too pretentious or pseudo-intellectual or too cerebral, he has a great way of bringing things back down to earth so that the cops they're talking to can actually understand what it is they're trying to explain. And while there are scenes that are disturbing, they're not disturbing for their own sake. I mean, when FBI agents are flipping through pictures of a particular crime, you're going to see some shocking imagery, but it's not a show, it's not depicted like Seven, where it's really trying to give you the heebie-jeebies. It's very clean and clinical and cold and objective. But you will definitely hear some very frank, candid conversations about some horrific acts of brutality. So if you're watching this show with your little guys, be sure to cover their eyes and plug their ears from time to time, or they're going to have nightmares for a very long time. But if I'm making this show sound too gruesome and grim, there is an amazing character named Debbie, played by Hannah Gross, who is the girlfriend of Holden Ford, and she is just sharp as a tack and sexy beyond words. We have all these great scenes where she and Holden, I wouldn't say she's challenging him, but she just really enjoys questioning basic assumptions that might be holding Holden Ford back from reaching his full potential. And she basically unlocks some parts of his mind that allows him to be receptive to what's going on in the world of academia that's basically being rejected outright by some of the old-timers in the FBI. And for those of you who like a little sex and nudity in the equation, there are some pretty exciting erotic scenes between the two of them as well, just as icing on the cake. But what really sold me on this show was the second episode, where they have a long series of sit-downs with a serial killer named Edmund Kemper, who's this giant human being who eventually gave himself up, and he's based on a real-life character. And it's a weird mix of terrifying tension, but at the same time, hysterical gallows humor that I felt myself kind of nervously laughing and giggling throughout, while expecting at any second for him to just snap his handcuffs and rip Holden in two. I mean, he's a giant human being, but he's also incredibly polite and incredibly affable, and he's very personable, and he really likes talking about what he describes as his vocation. And it's some disturbing stuff, hearing from the horse's mouth what goes down when you're literally severing the head of a human being so that you can have sex with the inside of the neck. I mean, it is not for the faint of heart. But I can't think of a scene that I've seen all year in any show or movie that had that much interesting, dramatic tension and contradictions all playing out at the same time. So suffice to say, I absolutely love this show. I thought it was absolutely outstanding. I mean, the first two episodes could have been released as a feature film. They could have taken a year off and then come back a year later for the further adventures of these two characters. Luckily, we only have to wait until Friday before we get the entire first season, and Netflix has already given the green light to season 2. So I am thrilled beyond words to have a new show to be excited about. And I strongly encourage anyone who likes cop shows or cop movies or thrillers or horror, like all the above. If you're interested in any of those genres or subgenres, definitely at least have a look at the first 2 episodes of Mindhunter. I think you'll be very happily surprised, disturbed, and entertained by what there is to see. In any case, that might be my last movie that I see at New York Film Festival, but it's been an absolute blast. If you want to hear the deep dive on the New York Film Festival, we did a huge comprehensive episode of my podcast, Wrong Reel, recently, and there's a link to Wrong Reel in the show notes below, but we basically tackle, from a couple different points of view, as many movies that were on the program as humanly possible. And that is why I'm wearing this particular shirt, as just a little gentle reminder for this video. But thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it. Please consider giving my channel a subscribe. And if you want to talk more, leave a comment in the comments below or give me a shout on Twitter at Colbrax. But I hope everyone has an amazing weekend, and I'll talk to y'all soon.